All right, welcome everyone to Behind the Fox. I'm Josh Feagans, along with my lovely wife and law partner, Katie Feagans. We are thrilled to bring you the latest episode of Behind the Fox, episode number 2. When we are not guiding our clients' paths to justice as injury lawyers at Feagans Law Group, we are fully immersing ourselves in what is the Fox Valley, St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia. And with Behind the Fox, we hope to showcase the greatness of our community and the people that live within it.
Behind the Fox takes our listeners behind the scenes of Fox Valley to learn about the business leaders, professionals, city leaders, philanthropists, and activists in our community that make things happen, the movers and the shakers.
Today, we are delighted to showcase someone who is dedicated to St. Charles.
Most people in the Fox Valley had driven through St. Charles hundreds of times. They know the river, the downtown, the restaurants. They have been all over to the coffee shops and have experienced the feeling that is St. Charles. But almost no one knows how the city actually works, who is making the decision, what is really being built behind the scenes, and what it takes to run a business and a city at once.
Today that changes. I'm delighted to introduce our first official guest at Behind the Fox, Ryan Bongard. Ryan is a St. Charles native who wears many hats: entrepreneur, public servant, coach, and proud family man. As the owner of 1221 LLC, Ryan specializes in automotive dealership consulting while also pursuing a variety of startup business opportunities. Beyond the business world, he serves as an alderman for the city of St. Charles and has dedicated countless hours, to youth athletics through organizations like St. Charles Junior Baseball, Tri-City Chargers, and more. A former college athlete and proud Notre Dame alum, which Katie will not hold against him since she's from Michigan.
We're still friends.
Still friends.
Ryan is also a husband and a father to 1,200 boys. 4. An unapologetic fantasy baseball fanatic who brings the same competitive spirit to the life that he does to the game. All right, Ryan, welcome to Behind the Fox. How you feeling?
Good. Thanks, guys. That was impressive. I'm a busy guy. I'm not going to lie to you. That is a lot. I'm not sure what order to any of that stuff falls. You know, you mentioned fantasy baseball. That actually might be way too high on my list of things that I probably prioritize. And I'm not very good at, so that's fine.
Well, 100%. And so Ryan had me in his fantasy baseball league for many, many years, and I'm also terrible at fantasy baseball. I had to give it up. Yeah, awful. All right, so the first thing I want to delve into, well, let's take a step back. Sure. So let's just set the scene for our listeners. So we've known each other for 14, 15 years, right?
Gone by fast.
Right. And Katie, why don't you tell the listeners how we all met?
So I met Ryan's beautiful wife back when they had 2 tiny babies, and I had 1. And we met in a music class. It was music together through the Park District in St. Charles. And I just remember watching this amazingly wonderful mother who just had these really adorable little boys that were, are they 11 months apart?
Close, 13.
13 months apart, and just managing them. And there I am with my 1 thinking, I don't know how to do all of this. And she's doing it with 2 of them. And then we just became really, really wonderful friends.
It seems like it was yesterday. I mean, literally seems like it was yesterday.
Well, it kind of was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we added 2 more, and then you guys added 2 more.
Why not? 2 more. That's right.
2 more little lions
Yes.
to add to the...
Yes.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the way, after all those introductions and the kids came and everything else, Ryan gets the hair up his to decide to get into politics. And he's currently in his 2nd term as Alderman of St. Charles?
2nd term, yeah.
And what is it, ward or district? What ward do you...
Ward 2. So St. Charles has 5 wards, 2 city council members per. So I always joke, you have 2 senators, you've got 2 city council members for each ward in St. Charles. Yes.
And your ward's the east side of St. Charles?
We are the east side, so 64 North Avenue cuts the east side basically in half. So the 2nd ward is to the north, 1st ward's to the south. So we have St. Charles East High School, you've got Charlestown Mall, or the former Charlestown Mall, you've got the new Fox Haven Square, but predominantly the 2nd ward is made up of residential. It's the biggest block of residential on that side.
All right. Now, so the biggest question I have just off the jump, and we've talked about this before, but what made you want to get involved in politics?
So, I think if you go all the way back to when you were a young boy, when you go back to high school and college, I think people start to gravitate towards just certain things. Hey, I love math, I love numbers, I like working with my hands, I like being outside. The public space policy, kind of this idea that everybody walks in the door. It doesn't matter, what your background is, what your, how much money you have in the bank, where you came from. We're all equal, and we're all going to go in and argue about the things we want to argue and fight for the things that we want to fight for in policy. And I started to gravitate towards that. Nobody in my family's in, government politics, but it was something that I was interested in. And, in undergrad, then into grad school, that I wasn't super active, but you followed stuff. You enjoyed it. And then from there, when I came back, I went out to D.C. after college, worked at the Attorney General's office out there, came back, flirted with the idea of going to law school, realized I'd probably not be a very good lawyer, and then went into the private sector, and it was great. But you still kind of had that interest. You like policy, you like people, you like feeling like you're being a part of the solution versus being, kind of part of the problem. And you just, one day thought you'd get into it, and then had really no plans in St. Charles, when we moved here. Just was kind of following stuff, getting to know your town. And then after, I can't remember, do you remember it was a little publication called The Examiner? I think it's still around. I don't know if it is. Forgive me if it is still around. They used to drop it off on your front door, right? So I started reading it, but it was all local, here's what happened in the Plan Commission, right? And I'm probably aging us like, well, we're 100 years old. Like the internet was here. So I actually started to write for that. So that kind of springboarded me. I was covering a lot of the meetings. I would go to St. Charles. I would go to Campton Hills. That was my beat. I was a political beat reporter for the Examiner for about a year. And that really, was a master class, if you would, in local government, sitting through a lot of meetings at 9:30 at night, not quite sure, like, what are they talking about? And am I in the right place? But it was great. And then, fast forward a couple of years later, you saw that the best way to put it is people deserving, a fresh perspective. You see in local government, the challenge, I'd say in years past, it's changing now, but in local government, it's not a knock, but you see a lot of the same names showing up on ballots. Why? You're not going to be on, cable news. You're not going to get a six-figure, salary. You don't have, people, paying you to come and speak at whatever gig. So you really have to do it because, you're investing in your community. You like public service. You want to go doing that. So you don't see a lot of names, showing up saying, hey, I want to run. And that's really what kind of, sparked me to say, yeah, you know what? I think people would deserve an alternative. And it really wasn't a knock on the people who were currently serving at the time. I ran just because I thought, hey, people deserve it. And I got crushed. But it was great. I mean, it was a wonderful experience because, you checked all these boxes of you were doing it for the right reasons. You wanted to get involved. And when you kind of came back after 2019, and then we had that little thing called the pandemic going on, that probably, timing is everything, was like, well, are you going to try again? I'm like, well, sure. We've been sitting in the house for about a year and a half. Why not? So, why did you get involved? Again, I really like people. I like policy a lot, and that's a place most people are like, ugh, policy, I don't want to fight. I'm like, policy is really important. So those were kind of the driving factors. And, it's worked out really well.
So you're in your second term,
Yeah.
and you mentioned you ran once, but you didn't make it, right?
I got crushed.
And what year was that?
2019.
Do you remember the numbers?
Of course I do.
What numbers?
It was almost 70-30. I think it was probably like 68-33. Yeah. But I mean, it was, and the individual that I lost to, she is I would consider a very good friend, a really good mentor. We ended up serving together after I came back and, ran a few years later. And it was a great experience. But it was kind of that push, I think, a little bit of, having new names showing up on ballots. That year that I ran, every race was uncontested except for mine. except for me. And again, I wasn't running because I thought that, this single issue or that. I ran because it's like, gosh, it's democracy. You should have more than one name on a ballot. So that was really kind of the driver. And, having basically, interned basically at the Examiner covering all these meetings, you had a good sense of what was going on.
So did you do a post-mortem after that first attempt and kind of say, this is my misstep, or this is what I need to do better, or anything like that?
Of course.
And what were those things?
You had no infrastructure. And I mean, you joke. I mean, the little things like, well, Katie's going to handle our social media. Like, I had no social media. What type of, mailer outreach did you do? I think we walked around and dropped off, like landscaping companies drop it, like they put stones or rocks into the bag and put it in the driveway. I did. I throw those things in the garbage Tuesdays. I'm sure 99% of people did that. And it was a really good experience of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, which people would think like, well, you're in small business, entrepreneur, but in that space, people get really uncomfortable about politics and policy and those things. They don't want to talk and if you're going to be a candidate, you better get comfortable real quick with talking to people about this issue or that. Same thing for me the first time around. I was, petrified, like, well, I don't want to go knock on Josh's door. I don't want to stop Katie when she's, that's going to make her uncomfortable. Go talk to her now. Well, then people aren't going to know you and know who you are and why you're running or what you want to do or anything. So then the results speak for themselves.
So that's an interesting distinction you make, because as a small business owner, no matter what our industry is, whether it's law or consulting or whatever, we're salesmen first, right?
Yeah.
We're used to being told no a lot. I mean, not Katie. No one ever tells her no, but we're used to it. So what was different about running in politics and being told no or being disagreed with than in business and being told no in a sale and just picking up and moving on to the next one?
That's a great question. I think this is going to sound like, business isn't personal. I would say politics it's really hard to hide the personal side of it, right? Because the issues that you're talking about are extremely personal. Hey, I don't want you to build X because it's, going to impact this, which is my backyard. Or, hey, I've got this, this policy position that's really, near and dear to my heart. Business, listen, you might go with a different provider, right? And that might sting. But the reality is we do the same thing in business. We're going to choose, this company to partner with versus that one. And, that's life. And I think you're probably a bit more geared up for that in business. Like, hey, we submitted, we responded to 10 RFPs. We swung and missed on 9 of them. Yeah, that's going to happen. Why? Because there's 10,000 other agencies out there that are applying. Politics, public service, government, the same, you get 2 candidates or 3 candidates are running. One of you or 2 of you is going to lose. It is a fact, and I think does it sting more than, not having success in business? I think so, just because it's that personal nature where business is, you're just more accepting of that. Maybe the competition side.
Right. And I think that you're making 2 really good points there. The first one is, when you're in business, you're selling a widget, you're selling a thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's not really you as it's not personal. But in politics, it is very personal. It's personal what it is that your positions are, but it's also personal. Somebody is looking at something and saying, I choose Ryan, or I don't choose Ryan. And that's hard.
I don't think I could have. You said exactly what I was trying to say 1,000 times better. I could not agree more. You're right. Like, somebody doesn't want to buy or partner with our company X. It's the company or the brand or the widgets or the sweaters or the sandwich. I didn't vote for you. Is kind of hard to avoid. Like, well, they didn't vote for me, but it's okay. No, they didn't vote for you. And you're right. That's probably the best way to frame that.
But then you figured it out, and they did vote for you. So how did that happen?
I think it started first with you had a much better plan. You knew where you fell short before. And again, I mean, we're not talking about, spending tens of millions of dollars for this. I mean, it's the spend is minimal, but how you're utilizing your time, the resources, realistically that you need, and honestly getting comfortable with not being comfortable, and going and having conversations. I mean, I talk a lot, as you two both know, but picking up the phone and calling Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because I knocked at their door and they didn't answer. That's something that's changed dramatically in, I think probably every level of politics and government service, and is how you engage with residents, how you engage with, business owners. It used to be, and there's absolutely still value in going and knocking on doors, but I refer to, the connection rate, the hit rate, the engagement rate. If I spend 7 hours knocking on doors, I can spend 7 hours on the phone or 7 hours texting and emailing. The most important thing is, how do I connect with Josh and Katie to talk about what issues matter the most to them or get their opinion on X? Go and knock doors. It's good. It has to be a tool in your toolbox. But the most important thing is, did you actually talk to Katie about what she thinks about the dam or whatever? Because if you didn't have that, you're still at a zero. Nobody cares that you knocked at their door. You dropped off, my plastic bag of whatever I put in there. That changed dramatically for me. And what I found was, again, I'm a numbers guy and I'm a competitive guy. You got your tick sheets and your trackers, and before you know it, you're like, wow, we've talked to 3,000 people in the second ward. I never got them at the door, but I had their phone number. I sent them an email. I caught them at line, dropping the kids off. It obviously helps too when you've got, a small army of children. You get to know a lot of people across a lot of school districts, and, football and baseball and, and church and all these. It's great. But changing, one of the things I learned from 19 to 21 was how and where you meet people, and how and where you connect with people matters way more than, how many hours did you spend knocking on doors? Because he didn't really answer the question. So that was a big, and then like anything else, you got smarter. Your opinions on things, your positions on things. I'm not sure how much they evolved, but you got better at being able to speak, confidently, articulately. If somebody said, "Hey, what do you think about X, Y, Z?" You're not giving this, kind of pie in the sky answer. It actually hits home, and that probably. Everybody thinks like, well, I deserve to win and I'd be the best. I believe in the voters. I think at the end of the day, they picked the right person in 2019 to represent them at that time. There's a reason why only 30% of people pick me, because probably my answers and my positions on things of, hey, he seems like a nice guy, but I'm going to go with X. The proof was in the pudding. So you got better.
I think there's something critical in there that we've talked to our children about. We've talked to our associates and team members at the office about, and even sometimes our clients. It's that sometimes the best way to learn is to fail.
Absolutely.
And so it sounds like you took all those lessons from 2019, applied them in 2021, and here we are today, and you're still representing the second ward.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in failure. You're not going to build a better process. You're not going to help your employees. You're not going to, be a better dad, a better husband, a better neighbor. If you're not willing to try things and put yourself out there and come up short and then learn from it and come back. If my wife was sitting here, she'd be like, the second time around, the third time around, he gets really good at stuff. The first time, maybe not so much, and everybody has to find their process and what works for them. My wife and, some of my good friends, totally opposite, right? They'll take a different approach and it works for them. But for me and whatever I've done, not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to, kind of put yourself out there and try something and, hey, it didn't work out. And then you're going to learn from it the next time. And the next time, boy, you're going to really get good.
So I think some of the things you said about why you were running or your motivations for getting into the aldermanic races wasn't so much that you had a hard position about certain policies. It was just you wanted a voice in the room.
Yeah, I think I would say that I thought people, and I still think this, I think people deserve options. I think people deserve, and I've always said this, like I'm not a big party. I don't. Some people I think get into public service because they are, a single point issue or a particular, party X. And I have a ton of respect for the people. But I've always been a person that I think it starts with people and people having options, especially in who's going to represent them. And what, as you became more educated with, local government, local politics, local service, feeling like, hey, it's the same kind of names. And then from there, once people have options, then it can go, what does this person think versus this person versus this one? Well, if I only have the same one or two people, we're kind of stuck in the same, like the same process or same flow of how we're going to tackle issues. So.
And I think one of the things that I respect so much about you is how you are able to connect with people and how you genuinely listen to people, right? And I think that makes a huge difference for you to represent other people. I think I feel very comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, Ryan, this is what I think. What do you think? And having an open and honest conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that you will take that into account to make sure that you are giving everyone a voice.
Yeah.
And making sure that, people have choices, but they also have the ability to influence.
Sure.
And I think that's huge.
Yeah. The really good advice I got a long time ago was whatever room that you're in, making sure that you are talking to whoever the person is that's sitting in the back. And if you feel like you're reaching, if Mary Smith or Bob Smith is that person in the last seat in the back of the row, and that person feels like they've connected with you, I guarantee you rows 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is going to walk away from whatever that means. They may not love what you heard. They may not love what they heard. They may not agree with your position. But if you've done that, then more times than not, whatever you're doing is going to be successful. And it could be a meeting of 9 people. It could be, I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago at there was an Open Gov conference, and it was on the future of local government. And there was probably 80, 90 people in there, and it was great. But that focus on making sure, I can still remember the young man's face, because I was talking to him in that back row, and it helps, that message helps people feel like they're connecting and they hear you or they're part of the conversation.
Sounds like your positions evolve from what the citizens are telling you they want as well, right?
Well, obviously every single person has their an opinion on a particular issue, right? I think it's how you go about tackling those issues, or how you go about tackling each questions in front of you. I've always been I'm representing the second ward. So that means, it's not every single person that agrees with me. It's the 4,000 voters in that district, and every single person, your job is to represent them. Have there been times where, hey, maybe my personal, position on something might be a little over here, but I can read the room a little bit, that the direction of this or the feedback that I'm getting is a little bit, the opposite or a little bit in a different direction? Sure. And I think that the expectation for a good representative is to, first and foremost, you have to listen to what the majority of those that you're representing are telling you. And if you disagree, well, then obviously you owe them an explanation as to, hey, here's why I don't agree. Let me walk you through why. And, ultimately how you choose to vote on something is going to be your decision, that you're going to be held accountable by your residents. But I think it's counterproductive for somebody to walk in and go, well, hey, here's my position. I'm hoping that, that is reflective of the people that we're representing. If not, they're going to let you know about it come election time. But at the very least, you have to make sure. And I think speaking for St. Charles, I think everybody does it. We do a good job of that. I think our council does a good job of representing, hey, here's what my residents, here's what my ward's talking about. Here are the things that are concerning, and it's reflective in why you see such a good dynamic with the St. Charles City Council and Mayor's office and the city's office, is that you don't have a lot of people walking in going, I want to do X, or we're going to do this. You hear a lot of people saying, my residents or our residents or my neighbors are asking about X, and that really drives. And staff is really, really responsive to that. We have a really, really good mayor who is absolutely resident first. So you've got a good dynamic. By no means does that mean everybody gets along, we're all on the same page, everything's fine, but you don't have individuals coming in being like, Katie and I got together and we're going to build that thing. And it's like, but they don't want it. Yeah, we're going to build it. You don't have that. So that makes it certainly a lot easier to show up every day and do that job.
So hopefully some of your second ward residents are listening to this podcast, or will listen to this podcast, right? Hopefully. How are some of the ways that they can connect with you to talk to you about the issues? What do you do to make yourself available to these folks?
So I mean, you could always go I'm not a big social media person, but I do have a fairly active Facebook page, so that's one way. But obviously, everybody can reach out via email, phone, text. One of the fun things I'm proud of, we started this. My colleague, Alderperson Munns, we started doing these Connect with Council sessions, where they're basically our mini version of a town hall. So every quarter, we do them quarterly, except for, I think we've missed one in 3 years. But we do. It's a quarterly town hall, and it's great. It's open door. You can come and sit for 5 minutes. You can stay for an hour and a half. I think we had one that almost went 3 hours. But it's the idea that we're trying to bring your local representation to you. Those meetings are on Monday. I mean, baseball practice, football practice, this, your yard looks terrible. It's hard to get to those meetings, every Sunday, if you're a resident or a stakeholder, let alone being an elected. So I'm really proud of those. I know that there's other city council members that do it as well, and I think those have been really, really helpful. Could we do a better job getting the awareness out and letting people know? Of course, but that's, we talk about some of the challenges of local government. It's you try and put as much of your information out there so that people see it, but the reality is we're still one pebble in this giant river of things that are going on, so people don't always see it. That's probably the biggest feedback I get from people is, I had no idea that this was going on. And I'm like, why didn't you email me? The city doesn't have a database of all the emails. I would love that. That would be amazing, And could we do some other things, send out flyers? We've talked about it, but that's probably the biggest challenge we have with it. But it has been extremely well received that people feel like, I know quarterly my city council members are going to have this town hall, and it's informal. And that's the other thing too, is, the city council meetings, and I'm not sure there's another way to, do this. They can be intimidating, right? Hey, I'm going to go stand at a podium in front of 10 people, like some sort of movie, and tell them all the things I don't like about their decisions while it's being recorded, while behind them there's 100 people staring. I'm like, what's the number one fear that people have is public speaking? Well, that's probably the most. And you don't go and show up and talk about, small issues. They're typically, pretty close to the heart. So those council meeting or those Connect with Council sessions are relevant because they are very informal. I mean, it's 20, 30 chairs kind of in a circle, coffee, donuts. It's at, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And I think it gives people the opportunity to come and be able to, say, hey, I don't like this. And I've had people sit down and say, I don't understand, why you voted on X. I'm like, let's talk. Let me walk you through, what the logic was. And I think it goes a long way.
I always say context matters, right? The why matters. Because I think especially when you're thinking about your neighbor, you're thinking about this thing that you're driving by every day, you want to understand why they're doing the things that they're doing, the decisions that are made. And I think that we live in such a wonderful area where people really do care. Yeah. And people are reasonable. But it's making sure that everyone comes to it and you're talking apples to apples and not apples to oranges.
Absolutely.
And that's an awesome opportunity. And that's held at City Hall?
Yeah, we typically do it at City Hall just because it's, it's convenient. It's, easy for people like, I've never been in this building. And I'm like, well, it's a great opportunity for you to come down. So it's again, it's the little things. I think I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. I think when you talk about like the next 10 years, the next 20 years, I think people's focus is backwards. I lived in Washington, D.C. I worked in Washington, D.C. Most people haven't. I've been to Springfield many times, but I don't work there. I don't go there. Most people can tell you what they like or what they don't like about what's happening in Washington or Springfield, right? Those two places are very easy punching bags. If, one half of the room's really happy, the other half's not. I'm not telling anyone that those points aren't valid and you should stick to your convictions. But if we had if we worked inward, or we started inward and worked outward, and you started with your local, whether you live in St. Charles or pick your town, if you focus that energy and that focus, if you focus your concentration locally first, and that same passion that people, hey, when I hear that, X person is doing, this in Springfield or Washington, if you had that same level of attention locally, one, my personal opinion is it's harder to have the same, frustration and anger when I see Josh at the grocery store, or I see Mary picking up her kids or whatever, it's easier for me to get frustrated with somebody that's 3,000 miles away and to have predisposition and opinions of why I don't like that person or why I don't like X. But I think we have it backwards. And I'm hoping that, over the next 2, 4, 10, 15, 20 years moving forward, is that shift to a more local, a local concentration of what's happening. We have the ability to affect more change, good or bad, in your day-to-day life at the local level and at the county level in Springfield. And this is not to say that the people in Springfield and Washington aren't important. They're incredibly important. But, I don't know why I keep saying Mary Smith. I don't know Mary Smith. But the person that lives, 2 doors down, the impact that, city council and the park district and the school district has on your day-to-day lives is so much more impactful and realistic. And if you get people they should know who their city council person is. You should know who represents you on the park district board. You should know who represents you on the school board. You should know what the 5 big items are for the school board. In St. Charles, D303 has a big referendum coming up, $300 million. Most people will get sticker shock, right? Whoa, that's a lot of money. But just hang on a second. Have you followed any of this stuff? And I'm not advocating one way or the other thing, but more the awareness. But I guarantee you those same people can tell you what they don't like Springfield's talking about or Washington. That's great, but we have to find a way to get people to be more aware, because you need that. You need that debate. You need that dialogue. You need that sense of investment of, I know who these people are. I know what the decisions are. St. Charles, in my 5 years on city council, you look at the weight of the topics that have come across our desk compared to way back when I was writing for the Examiner. And obviously they had serious issues and topics, but if you look at the context, I would say complexity, the seriousness of a lot of the topics that are coming across city councils and local governments today, they are significantly heavier, in my opinion, than say 10, 20 years ago. So this, in my opinion, this is already here. So you talk about local, stakeholders, electeds, business leaders, you name it. If we have more of a local concentration first, I think that helps everybody moving forward. That's a really long answer.
That's a great answer. It's a great answer. And I think you really hit something there, because locally, the individual has way more ability to impact decisions than they do nationally or even at a statewide level. I mean, look at your ward, for instance. You say there are 4,000 residents?
I think a little bit more. I'm thinking about registered voters.
Registered voters. Right. Okay. Yeah. So 4,000 registered voters. And of the 4,000 registered voters, how many typically vote in an aldermanic election?
So when going back to 2017, 2019, 9%, 11% turnout. I was really proud. The last 3 election cycles, we're getting that number into the 40s. So, this is, and it's not one person, it's been collective. There's been a lot of concentration, particularly in our ward and St. Charles in general. We've gone from, 800 people voted to 3,000. And I think some of the themes I'm touching on, you're seeing that, and that it helps. The more people you can bring into the process, right, the better it's going to be, the more rich the dialogue. By no means are you going to get, agreement, right? You're going to have more people coming in going, boy, I really don't like this. But honestly, that's what you need, because that's how you move forward is, hey, we have 51, 55, 60, 65% of people are in favor. Then we feel comfortable moving on. What you don't want to have is 80% of people going, who's Josh? What is he doing? Because now now you're moving forward. And you can't force people to be a part of the process. But from the time that I first got involved in this, low numbers, hey, I won my election by 300, 300 people voted. It's like 300 people and 4,000 registered voters. That's not good. But in the 10 years that I've kind of been around this space, that number's grown to 30, 40% turnout. You're rivaling some years where that's how many people voted in the state rep race. So again, now the challenge is, how do you sustain that? How do you continue to grow that? How do you continue to make sure that now people are engaging in the process? Now you got to make sure that you're focused on the things that they want you to talk about. It can't just be, well, hey, I'm so glad that you showed up, but now we're going to talk about everything I want to talk about. That's not really how this works.
So the growth in the voting during your time period is great, but I guess my point more to the fact is this: instead of looking at millions or tens of millions or how many millions of votes to get access and to get an alderman like Ryan on the ballot, you're talking about 1,600, 1,800 people voting, and one person has way more ability to make a difference
Yeah.
amongst 16 or 1,800 votes than they do millions and millions and millions.
Absolutely.
And to your point, you're in a city that's looking at hot topic issues, right? You're looking at how do we tax, you're looking at how do we develop our city, you're looking at how do we redevelop the east side of the city, you're looking at all these crucial things that are going to make St. Charles more St. Charles over the next 30 or 40 years, going to have way more impact on the residents' lives, their children's lives, those to come. I think your point is all well taken then.
Yeah, I think you talk about the impact one resident can make. And again, I've never served in Springfield, I've never served in Washington, so I shouldn't be so quick to presume that one resident or one stakeholder picking up the phone and calling their state rep or isn't having the impact. But I can tell you the impact that it has when somebody picks up the phone or sends an email, and again, this is not at all to say, if somebody reaches out automatically, right, the opinion changes and we're going to go with Bob. But it does land. Why? Because these are the people. I mean, when you're talking about, 3,000-4,000 people in a small ward, you do know. You are able to have a connection that I think is just by sheer volume. If you're representing 400,000 people versus you're representing 5,000. So if you can get more people to engage and be a part of the process, it really does go a long way. It doesn't always guarantee that it's going to be, we're all on the same page, but it really does land.
And you care.
Yeah.
And that comes across so clearly. And I think it's what enables you to be able to make a difference and to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan, I think a lot of people hear the word alderman and they're like, okay, so you go to a couple city council meetings a month. But explain to everyone, what does an alderman actually do in the city of St. Charles? What's the time commitment? What are you doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
So the best way they are your congressperson. So think of it, if we're all in high school right now and you're thinking about the way local government is set up, is your city council members are basically your legislature. They are your Congress. They are supposed to write the laws, the ordinances. Your mayor is your executive. That's the president. Staff would be, in this scenario, kind of like your judiciary, but that's your three legs of the stool of your local government. So city council members, they're there to look at ordinances. They're to talk about vision. What are we prioritizing? What are the 2 or 3, mission critical things that we have to focus in on? We have to represent our residents. We have to make sure that we're pushing the things that they want us to talk about, and we need to make sure that we're working in conjunction with staff in executing on that. I think every city council member does it differently, and there's no right or wrong way. Certain people spend, probably twice as much time, in individual meetings. Some people like to, sit down one-on-one with each person. Some people like to do it. So I think this style and how you go about doing it is, kind of user preference. Personally, I probably spend about 2 hours every day, just specifically, I call them office hours, on city council stuff. And that could be meeting with a local business owner about a concern that they have. It could be, sitting down with staff to review, hey, we've got this, policy initiative, or we've got X we want you to, to weigh in on. It could be sitting down with a colleague or two to talk about, this project or that meeting. So you're looking at, call it a couple hours a day. And obviously it will peak given certain, topics that are a bit heavier than others. And then you've got your commissions and your meetings.
So you've got the meetings, but it might surprise some residents that you're also on commissions, right?
Yes.
So just like in federal government or state government, there's these commissions that talk about certain policies, areas, and whatnot. So what commissions are you on?
So I served as the liaison for the St. Charles Business Alliance I think I'm still on there, but I know that I'm probably coming off. So I was on there for 5 years, and that could not be prouder of that group in the 5 years. They do tremendous work. So that was when I first got on city council in 2021. Mayor Vitek asked me, because that group was going through a bit of a transition, and they were still growing, but coming out of COVID, there was a lot of focus in on obviously your local business community, right? And what are things? How are we all managing this in 2021? That was right in my wheelhouse, what I do professionally. So that was a really, really good group to be connected with, and Jenna and her team, fantastic. So, but after 5 years, I think they're in a pretty good spot. So Mayor Hull asked, everybody what other, interest, anything. So there was actually opening on equity and inclusion. So I volunteered. So I was just appointed to that. So that's exciting group that's fairly new. They're only about 4 or 5 years old as well. And they have a lot of initiatives, a lot of really important topics. So between that, and then obviously there's other. So like I'm involved with the Chamber of Commerce. There's a number of really good organizations, groups, some more formal than others, in St. Charles. And I think as a city council member, a lot of people want you to, they would love your time, and if you can, be helpful and engage. So right now those are, we used to have government services. We used to have subcommittees. So I was the chair of government services for 2 years, covering we were that little topic of like IMEA and what are we going to do with the Fox River Dam, some fairly big topics. We've moved to a different structure, so we no longer have those more traditional subcommittees, but a lot of those same topics, they're just in a bit of a more informal way.
So I know Katie's got a quick question for you, but just touch on a couple things you said there. In case our listeners don't know, what is IMEA?
IMEA?
Yeah.
Illinois Municipal Energy. So if you go, I'll take you back. So you talk about, small topics like, hey, where does a municipality get its power from, right? Little things that we take for granted, like I flip the light switch on and all the lights go on. I think my phone's still going off.
If we were in court right now, the judge would confiscate that.
I told you I never would have been a good attorney. I'd be like, sorry, Your Honor. Where does our power come from, right? Those little things. Again, when I was running for city council, that wasn't even a question or a topic. So IMEA is ultimately where the city of St. Charles, it's a co-op. So about 30 years ago, the city of St. Charles entered into basically a co-op. So it's a public, try not to get too technical because it'll get in the weeds real fast. A joint venture with 30 other municipalities to pool resources to get your power. That contract, we were approached by IMEA, again, a couple of years ago, notifying every municipality saying, hey, we would like everybody to, sign an extension to continue this venture. 3 municipalities, St. Charles, Winnetka, and Naperville, basically said, we want to take some more time to look at this. I think Winnetka ultimately did sign, so they, 90% of them, Naperville and St. Charles have still said, at this time, we still want to take a look at all of our options. We understand, why IMEA is asking municipalities to make this commitment and move forward. At this time, we still, there's so much unknown. There's so many things with changing energy markets, costs, green energy, sustainability. It's a very heavy topic that is going to take more. St. Charles and Naperville kind of in the same spot that want to take more time and look at it. Now, the challenge is nobody has a crystal ball, right? So you're going to be in a spot, it was a year ago that council, and I was chairing government services at the time, and we had a task force, I would say hundreds of hours, but you're spending lots and lots of time working with staff and going through it. This is not a small topic of, hey, where do you want to ensure that St. Charles gets its power for the next, 3 decades? Kind of a tiny one. Not like, hey, why didn't my garbage cans, get picked up at 9 o'clock? So when you talk about like the weight of some of the topics and things, like that's a big one. And we're still working on that. So
usually when my garbage cans don't get picked up, it's because my 16-year-old didn't.
I was just going to say, more times than not, it's because one of my sons was, lazy in getting that down there. So,
failure to put it out in the first place.
Yeah, it doesn't get picked up.
I think that'll kind of dovetail to my question, and that is, what decisions go through you that would surprise most St. Charles residents?
I think I'm not sure if there's a decision like one particular decision, like, oh, I didn't know that the city did that. I think that the complexity and the weight, so whether it's, financial, like our budgets, like, I think when you sit down and talk with a resident, a stakeholder, I think that they might be surprised City Council, St. Charles just passed a $252 million budget this last year. And I think most people are like, 252, that's a lot. And it is a lot. I mean, it's about, we have an aging city with a lot of infrastructure needs. You have, costs are, everybody knows. But I think, so I'm not sure that there's one particular, I had no idea that the city did that. I think the typical resident, if you were sitting down having a drink, having coffee, and you were talking through something, I think it's the complexity on some of the things. Again, in no short order, you have IMEA. That is a generational decision about where you're getting your power. When we get into where it's, are you going to try and go completely green, sustainable? Are you trying to look at some sort of mix? What's the agency? You have IMEA, which is this co-op that has its benefits. That is a decades-long decision that I think your average resident would go, wow, I didn't know that city council has to win. That's a big one. We recently, the city just passed a resolution basically affirming its commitment that we want to keep the pool, the dam more or less on the Fox River. We obviously want to continue. We're not stopping anybody from wanting to continue whatever study, survey, continue to it. But when asked the question, what is your opinion? Yes, the majority opinion is that we want to keep the pool and that downtown footprint that we've spent years trying to cultivate. So I'm not sure that there's one particular issue, one particular question that people would be surprised to learn about. I think most people, and at least in my experience, they're like, wow, I thought you just, showed up and cut a ribbon and, did X. I'm like, these are heavy topics. So,
well, when you say $250 million annual budget, 252, that doesn't include things like the park district or the libraries or anything like that, right? Those are separate.
Those are all separate governing bodies. So park district, school board, library, city, they are all separate. So yeah, again, your public safety, your infrastructure, obviously those are your two big drivers when you look to City Hall of, make sure that my streets are safe, clean, and I can drive, my water, and then you get to things like capital projects, which are important because obviously I think people forget at times, like, our community is competing against other communities. So if you're I have a law practice that I want to, put down some roots, and I have 20 people and client, all these things. I can go to St. Charles, I can go to Geneva, I can go to Naperville, I can go to Schaumburg. Like, how you compete as a community matters, right? And those resources. And hey, if you want to build a 400 home development, do you have the infrastructure to go and do that? So you're always competing. I don't think that people always realize that. And that's where a lot of that budget is driven to. Plus you've got, investments that you've made in years past. And, at the end of the day, everything costs money.
So besides the budget, besides IMEA, and maybe besides the river, which is a hot topic with everyone, of course, what's something that's happening in St. Charles right now that most people don't know about but should?
I would say it's, where are we going? So vision matters a lot, especially in a community like St. Charles, because you have such a rich history. You have such a good culture. You have people that are passionately committed to, when they talk about, they wear St. Charles on their sleeve, and that's awesome. What is your vision moving forward as a community, right? How do you continue to grow? What are you going to prioritize? What are the investments, the development that you're trying to make? How do you continue to manage, your relationship with, the park district and the school board and Geneva and Batavia, and how do you meet, business owner A and B, and you got a lot of competing. And then at the end of the day, the people that are on top of all of it are your residents, right? So you have a lot of competing interest and drive in that. So I'm not sure it's like, I would say the single biggest thing right now is where are we going? What is your vision for your community? And that's going to ultimately tell you what projects, what investments, what things you prioritize, how you go and do this. And that's probably the single biggest thing that, what are we working on? What should people be talking about? That will tell you so much about what's coming next in the next 2 years, right? You're always going to have the day-to-day operational things that are there, but that vision of when you wake up 5 years from now. I mean, we started this talking about, it was 15 years ago. We were at a mom, son, newborn. And, I mean, that was 15. It feels like it was yesterday. So in this space of, St. Charles, and we're not alone, Geneva, Batavia, pick your community, you will blink. It'll be 2 years from now, which bothers me, but it'll go so fast. And if you don't have this vision and mile mark of what do you want to be, and listen, not everybody's going to agree, but if you can, I shouldn't say it that way. I think most people will agree with general themes of what they want, where they go. And then you can, debate, argue, work on how we go to get there. But that one thing that, what people aren't talking about, or what should they be talking more about, or what are council, it's vision. It's where do you want to go and what do you want to be? Because that really is going to be that driving force of how do you answer that question about IMEA. Great, you've got your position currently on the dam, but what does that look like 3 years from now? And then pick your projects as they come down the line. That's the single biggest thing. And it doesn't matter if you're in the first ward, the second ward, the fourth ward, it binds everybody together because St. Charles does bring a lot of people together. So what is it going to look like, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
So
strategic planning.
Yeah.
So that vision leads into a question that I see a lot, both locally, statewide, and on the federal level. Is there any talk, any concern, any rumblings about data centers in St. Charles?
There are. The good news with, if you're not pro data center, I guess, is we don't have a lot of land to do that. I mean, there's really not any space. The question was posed a couple weeks back in a meeting I was in, and I'm like, I can't even think where some of the properties that people were thinking about they're not St. Charles or adjacent to St. Charles. Hypothetically, if a firm company were to come, our infrastructure, again, we have great people in public works, city finance. I'm not that person, but I would go out on a limb and say, I don't think that our infrastructure could meet the demands as is right now of even doing something like that if it was proposed to you. At the same time, land-wise, our boundaries are pretty landlocked. You'd have to, annex in something and it's not zoned for it. So different than other communities. I don't think that the data center is going to be probably on our list of stuff we have to worry about for the time being.
Data centers are one of those hot topic issues. And, there's really not a good answer, is there? I mean, you need them to advance with the AI race, but they drain so many local resources, right?
Right.
So it seems to be very controversial.
Yeah, I mean, it was similar to a couple years back. I'll call it not just Amazon, but the distribution centers, right? They were popping up everywhere because people's buying. How do you meet? Here's a great economic business school question. How do you meet the demands of a changing market where we all go online and now buy 70% of our goods and services, but yet at the same time you tell that same company, but you can't build a distribution center within 100 miles of my home, but you better not raise the prices on me because I'm not going to buy it. Okay, so I can't build a distribution center anywhere near Chicagoland, but I've got 3 million customers that say don't raise the price on X, and you want me to put it over. Like, how do you square that circle? So I mean, obviously smarter people than me at billion-dollar companies figuring out how to do that, but it's a similar conversation of how do you kind of balance that of I need this product delivered to my house by 5 o'clock tonight. I need it to be cheaper than I currently see it, but I don't want to see anything that resembles, a 100,000 square foot, center, as I'm driving my kids to school. So it's kind of a similar of we're all online. Everybody's got all the data, devices, technology. I mean, that's the way of the world. Where are you going to put that next center, and certain communities being realistic about, if you have a property, how do you go about managing that if somebody does show that interest? In terms of St. Charles, I just don't see. You just don't have the land,
Katie, you have a question?
So what is the most frustrating part of local government that nobody talks about publicly?
It's time. like I said, it's time. You don't have, this is it's defined as it's a part-time position. And whether you're spending 2 hours a day on it, 20 hours a week, 5 minutes, whatever. The most challenging thing I think is just time, is being able to get to all the people, having the resources. I think if you're sitting down with members of our staff, we have a really good staff. Top down, from director level, to any employee. They're really, really good people that know their jobs. They've been here for years. It's time. It's just being able to do all the things, with the limited. It's getting harder and harder. The questions are getting harder. The dollars need to be spread further. People expecting things quicker, faster, whatever. And how do I get to all these people? And then you've got elected officials like a guy like me saying, boy, I don't know if we can continue to spend that. It's a really tough dynamic. So I think that people don't see that. They don't see that. And I don't blame them. It's it's not like we have C-SPAN following us around for.
Oh, but you might.
But you could. But I think that's probably your biggest challenge for the your typical. I hate saying average because it's like your traditional resident of. They have their lives. They're busy. They're focused on their stuff. They expect their government to represent them well and do those things and do them the right way. The challenge is it's time. And I think that's, for all of us, is probably the biggest challenge, the most consistent challenge, in addition to other, curveballs that life throws us. It's time. How do I get to all of these 10 things? And it's really important to me to get my residents and my local stakeholders and, sitting down with, your colleagues, right? I'm one of 10. That's my favorite thing of saying is, listen, I'm one opinion. It could be 9-1. And there's been a few votes when it was 9-1 and I was that one. And it's important to make sure that you're getting to all of these stakeholders and that you're doing all these things. But the reality is, I think to answer your question, it's time. That's the biggest challenge that people don't see. And what's the biggest? It's time.
Well, and I think the biggest thing that impresses me so much with your time is you run a full-time business, automotive consulting. You have these startups, from staffing to sports ventures to all these other things. You're coaching sports for your children all year long.
Yeah.
I know when you do football, that's 25, 30 hours a week probably, right?
Probably.
I've done it myself,
yes,
I know.
You have.
And you're spending 20 hours or more a week as an alderman.
Yeah.
And then you still have to be a husband and a father and all those things, right?
Well, that's why you don't want to look inside my garage or take a peek in my backyard, because you'd be like, what is happening here? But I think, so yes to all of that, but there's nothing in there that I don't enjoy. And I think if there's something in there that, God, I hate this, well, then put it down. If life is short, time is valuable. If I grew up around sports. So to me, sports are so valuable, and it never was about, are you the best or the worst? Are you going over here, doing this? That's going to be a question for somebody else. But the lessons that get taught, especially in team sports, are invaluable. So I enjoy it. I gravitate to it. I'm not very musical. My wife and kids make fun of me a lot of how I don't know the lyrics to anything, but yet I would think that I could be singing on stage somewhere right now. And they're like, you're terrible. But you find those things that you like and that you gravitate to. And I think, professionally, some of the ventures that we've had, this would be a whole separate session that we could sit down if I could walk through some of the stories of the challenges. Navigating some really, really serious, personnel issues that through our company, losing key team members to some really tragic things for chunks of time that you weren't prepared for, pandemics, recessions and big stuff. And we're a small business. We're typically about 25 to 30 full-time employees. You talk about one day you wake up and the whole world is shut down, and again, everybody was impacted by that. We in particular, our entire business model changed, so at the same time, you have to like the space that you're in. You have to enjoy all those things. They're obviously never perfect. They are going to have their challenges. They are going to, make you get grayer and your hairline recede and eat more and stay up later. But if you get up every morning and you're kind of like, wow, I still like these things. I still like that space. You're doing something right, and eventually you're going to get to, a spot where, the kids will move on, and then you'll be wishing for those days that you're driving to, Carroll Stream tonight at 9:15 for a, game that's going to be 52 degrees outside. Or you're going to be looking forward to, gosh, I wish, that venture that we had, I wish we were back in our startup days. That was so much fun. And now we're kind of in the day-to-day. And, the minute it stops becoming fun with some of those things, that's when you put it down and you go do something else.
Well, and to the point where you say fun, I think many St. Charles residents would be surprised to learn your compensation as an alderman, right? It's not $170,000. It's not six figures. You don't. No. I mean, you probably could benefit from some insider trading, but you don't even get that kind of information, right?
No.
So tell our listeners. I mean, how much money?
I joke. I'm like, we're lucky because St. Charles City Council members do get paid. There are some communities where that's all they don't. So I've never really added up. I think it's like $5,000 annually.
A month.
No, annually.
Oh, annually. Okay, annually. I knew that answer. I was just
$5,000 a month would actually be. It's a part-time job. That's not bad.
It's not bad.
No, I mean, I joke. I was at that conference I was at a couple weeks ago. I was talking with some other, and he was like, "Oh, we don't get paid." And I was like, "Oh, so sorry." I mean, like, it's a touchy subject for people of elected officials getting paid, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot.
And so you do the math. You're doing 20 hours a week. Let's say you take 2 weeks of vacation, which I doubt you do. Let's just call it that. So 20 times 50, what is that number? Like 1,000 hours?
Oh, sure. Easy.
So you're spending 1,000 hours a year and getting paid less than 5,000 or so?
Right, after that, sure.
You're getting paid less than minimum wage.
Sure. Yeah, you haven't laid it out for me, and that's gonna weigh on me. And when I walk away and go, I'm not sure I might be backwards here. But yeah, I mean, that's where it goes back to, again, we're backwards a little bit in you want more people, getting involved. You want more people at the local, at the small, the local level, small government level, and how you go, is this a job that needs to be making, 100,000? Of course not. But the way that you might attract more people, wow, it's 1,000 hours a year. What are, and I have no idea what those might be, but it's definitely worth, if you're talking about trying to rethink how we're getting more people to get engaged in the process. I mean, how do you make it more valuable for their time? I think that's a great place to start, at least ask the question. And so I reference. So I'm having a lot of these conversations, and why this platform is such it kills two birds with one stone. Talking about rethinking local government. What's the future of local government? What's that next generation of local leaders? I don't plan on being, a 4 or 5 term city council member. I do believe that you should have people. Change is good in this role, getting different perspectives. By no means am I somebody who is going to get every question policy right. I'm also like, by nature, people are going to want to hear a different voice. I've heard from that Ryan guy enough. Let's bring in Katie. And I think that's fair. And that's what you need in representative government, especially at the local level. But these types of questions of how do you get, somebody that's 10, 15 years younger than us to look at that and go, yeah, I'm willing to dedicate, 1,000 hours a year to this, but maybe their motivations and their incentives need to be different. I think that we should look at, any organization, would take a chance and say, boy, are we doing the right thing to attract, the best people to come and be a part of this?
So, and not to be flippant about it or anything, and I promised Ryan when we brought him on, we wouldn't get into too many controversial political topics, which we will not. But, I just think it's very illustrative for someone like you who has such a busy schedule. Yeah. And you're not doing this for the money. You're doing it to better your community. And I think that's really what I want to highlight.
Yeah, I think it's I've been fortunate enough in the 5 years, you've kind of had 2 different councils. Every single person there doing it for the right reasons. They're here to serve. They believe in their community. They just want to do their part. Nobody's showing up going, hey, here's my stepping stone to the United States Senate. No, everybody's here because they genuinely like their community. They like their neighbors. You don't have I'm a single point issue. I'm really upset about X, and that's why I'm here. And you're lucky. You're fortunate. St. Charles, it sounds a little hokey. St. Charles is really fortunate in that the dynamics, again, no shortage of tough questions that are in front of it, like most communities, but still tough questions. And you do have a really good dynamic of people, of elected officials showing up. Perfect? Absolutely not. Start with me. Not perfect at all. But you got people that are doing it for the right reasons. You got everybody's working full time or is retired, but has, things and is here dedicating the time and energy, trying to do their part.
So, Ryan, what is the biggest missed opportunity in Geneva, St. Charles, or Batavia right now?
I think if you ask, that would depend on who you ask. I had a really interesting meeting a couple days ago with an individual, and they said something, and I was like, boy, I never thought of it that way, where, we're all competitive. Like, somebody says, oh, Geneva, and St. Charles kind of bristles like, oh, it's Geneva, or Batavia, whatever. The idea of more regional strategic planning, right? The reality is if Geneva's doing well, I'm going to bet you St. Charles is doing it. Like First Street and our downtown footprint are the results of Third Street in Geneva, right? Batavia, I've spent more time in Batavia in the last year and a half than I did in the first 15 years of living here. So I think one of the things that we need to, and again, in the limited time that you have, when now we're stacking out, these are not full-time jobs, who's doing that and how do you, how much do you put on to city staff, et cetera. But, we first met, living in St. Charles. You guys have been in Geneva and Batavia. Like I come and meet with, Josh and Katie, talk about accident. How do we as community leaders tap into and partner and leverage and think strategically about, hey, this is what's going on with X in St. Charles. Let's think about that, and then we organically will look at things like, we will compare, how do they do it? But I think taking it a step further to think about, wow, if we did this, that would really impact over here and vice versa. So I think that, and that doesn't just go for the Fox Valley, but, you could probably, Schaumburg to Hoffman Estates to Palatine, like that kind of regional strategic thinking, because, again, I was joking with this. He's like, I go from Batavia to Geneva to St. Charles. It's just one big town to me. And I'm like, never thought of it that way. But you're right. The reality is, you go to Target here, Whole Foods there. I'm playing in a soccer game over here, and I'm meeting, legal counsel in this town. But we don't think like that. And a little bit, and not every single circumstance. And obviously there's different cases where that would be more applicable than others. But I think that would be an opportunity moving forward for, again, that kind of next level of thinking or approach that might serve people well.
I think we would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
So not being from St. Charles, Geneva, or Batavia, but coming to this area since really law school, being married in this area, living in this area, having a business in this area, one of the reasons we chose it was because it did feel like one large community. They call it the Tri-Cities for a reason, right?
Right.
And so I think that's a great, concept of what we're missing right now. How can we do better by coming together?
Yeah. This is years ago when I, kind of coming out of the pandemic work-wise, we really focused a lot in on the Chamber of Commerce, putting your focus in there. We have since gotten away from it and actually thinking now about we should go back to that, because this theme we keep coming back to is, more local, more concentration there. But the idea that, I have no idea what the Geneva Chamber of Commerce is doing, or Batavia or North Aurora, right? And it's like, you cross one street, now you're at the Dunkin' Donuts that's in North Aurora, or how many people drive to Whole Foods now in St. Charles because it's there, right? So like the idea that, we approach some policy decisions, and again, we're not talking about, drafting a charter that says we're all going to make our decisions the same way, but the reality of thinking that, just because it's one street over to a resident or a stakeholder or a business venture, that like they don't see those boundaries the same way that you do. Their map is drawn in hey, I got a 50-mile radius. It happens to touch Bartlett and Elburn, and yet at the elected and staff level, we think of our little, here's our little box. And again, it's not bad logic. It's just hey, here's an opportunity as you start to think about the next, where are you going to be in 2030? What are you not thinking about today that you should be? Or what are some different ways you can tackle it? I think that would be one that I'd put high on my list.
I think that kind of answers where I was going to go, but what does the Fox Valley look like in 10 years if everything goes right?
Boy, that's a big one. I think whether it's, I'll focus on St. Charles because I don't want to. You need to look at the things that are working well in other communities. Whether it's knocking on the door, talking on the phone, meeting with we don't want to be Naperville. Naperville's wonderful. You need to take what Naperville does well, and you need to find a way to make it work the St. Charles way. You need to find a way. Look at what you like about Geneva and make it work the St. Charles way. So I think when you look 5-10 years down the road, that type of mentality, that type of focus will serve you extremely well. I'm not trying to replicate X community in Indiana or Washington or Texas, but I'm going to look at some of the themes and concepts of what they're doing, how they're leveraging their space to make it work for St. Charles. If we do it that way, sometimes we can get electeds and staff can get a little bit in the weeds with how many trees do we have. It's an important question in the micro, but thinking about the macro of, hey, 3 years from now, how is this investment going to complement X, Y, and Z? What is it going to move? How is it going to shape and move the community forward? So I think that's such an important part of do you want to keep the dam? You want to keep the pool? You've answered that question. Excellent. Now you can start to move forward truly with redeveloping. So the city owns the former police department site, right? It's been 10 years. Go all the way back to when, I didn't know what I was doing and getting, crushing elections. It's been a decade. We're in the exact same spot. Here's what you don't want to have. You don't want to have 10 years from now be in the same spot and hand to the next two people, hey, I didn't figure it out. And obviously in some of these circumstances, like, Charlestown Mall, we don't own, the city doesn't own the mall. It's a private property. So at the end of the day, even if I wanted to come in and, we're bulldozing it today, it's your property. Do with it what you want. The PD site is owned by the city. That is 100% on us. So again, going back to, what does this community do well? What are the trends? Hey, how are we trying to make things more sustainable, more walkable? How are we trying to draw more people into our community where maybe we want to lower the burden on things like, infrastructure, or maybe we don't want to build, 1,000 more acts, but we want 1,000 more people to come to our community on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday and, enjoy our restaurants, walk our streets, hang out in our parks, do all those things. And then maybe they go back, to Batavia. So it's those types of themes that I think are really, really important, which again goes back to the challenge of time and, part-time, positions. And I don't have an army. I don't have a staff. I don't have an army of lobbyists behind me. I don't have, all this. So you're really doing this in a way and in partnership with staff and your colleagues of, boy, that's not the easiest thing to tackle. So, but that's still the opportunity that you have in front of you.
So we have spent the majority of our talking time here today focusing on your role as an alderman, but there are many other roles and hats you wear. We talked about business owner, father, husband, sports coach, all that kind of stuff, right? And we're going to have you on again to talk about some of those things because I think our viewers would be very interested.
Talk hours about Tri-City Chargers football, St. Charles baseball, and it would be a riot.
It would be a riot. But what I want to before we get into some rapid fire questions about St. Charles, what I want to ask you is kind of like outside of time, right? When Ryan sits down at night, has a Miller Lite, and is thinking about his day, what's the hardest part about all of this?
I am somebody who hates losing more than I actually like winning. And that's been told to me a lot. Like, wow, you were, it was successful. You won. And it's like, yeah, that's what we were supposed to do. It's this weird dynamic of like, when you fall short, that becomes more of the motivator. That becomes more like, I focus more on the things of like, hey, I didn't do this well. I didn't get there. And when you have so many things that are going on, there's no shortage of that. But it's a weird dynamic of that's actually what helps I think you get out of bed the next day and go, okay, let's go and tackle that. And I think every person's a little bit different of what drives them, motivates them. But at the end of the day, I'm always the person that's sitting down making a list of all the things I didn't get to or the things I want to focus on tomorrow. I don't spend a lot of time sitting there going, hey, that was a great session with Josh and Katie. It was so much fun to do. You're like, yeah, it was supposed to be. They're great people. This was a great exercise. You're already thinking about the 4 or 5 things that you want to get to and go and do. And staying up way too late at night is, also helpful in making those long lists.
Well, as you sit here now, you're probably thinking about all those calls you just missed, the ding, ding, dings on your phone. What's blowing up? What do I need to get to? All that kind of stuff. But, your point is well taken. Katie and I talk about this a lot. It used to be when we settled a big case or even settled a case, we got super excited. Now we just expect it. That's our job. That's what we're supposed to do on a daily basis. So what is the next thing that gets you super excited? So what is that thing besides X that gets Ryan super excited?
So right now at work, we are going through industries, markets are changing so fast. And I think for a long time, we were naive. I think in the consulting, strategic planning, product development space, we were like, oh, those are, X industries problems, not really us. And I think for the first time, I think it's hard to deny that we are now seeing real impact to our day to day. And that's where our focus is at, is now reimagining our organization and the products and the services that we're delivering for our clients and customers. That is a full-time job that's taking all of your attention of, hey, Josh's role 2 years ago looked like X. We've put so much time and energy investing into Josh, and this is awesome. But the landscape has changed dramatically for Josh. How do we reimagine him in a new role, or what is the expectation for client X of how we're going to go and do this? And that is scary, but also extremely exciting because, listen, industries change, business changes, economies come up and they go down. But the reality is there's always a company that kind of gets an organization, an industry that kind of gets reborn or reimagined out of it. You got to be willing to go through kind of some of the scary times, but then if you do it the right way and you put in the energy, you might be 10 times stronger on the other side of it. And we're no different. We go back, our anchor was professional development, strategic planning, going into an organization, and they're having X problem, and really they would bring us in to help fix the problem. And then as people got less interested in that and just kind of wanted to outsource, hey, I don't want to fix my marketing and advertising problem, you just go do it. That became kind of the shift, just outsource all of it, just be done with it. And that made sense. Why? Because you drop your operational costs, your P&L, et cetera. This is great. But then that cycle starts to fade a little bit. Why? Because people want to bring back the control. And now they're like, well, hang on a second. I can leverage all of this fancy technology. And we're no different. Now, we have some wonderful firms that we even partner with in advertising marketing. We're now seeing that, like, gosh, we could do the same thing. It's crazy. So, but now this kind of shift back to, hey, you guys want to bring things in-house, or hey, you want to do your own product development. But now this new thing opens up of, how do you do your strategic planning? How do you do your organizational acts? How do you tackle that? So our ability to grow and change and adapt. I think companies and organizations that are, for like a one-trick pony, right? We make widgets and nobody's buying widgets anymore. You got a problem. You're going to be in trouble. But if you're not that, you should be, you may not have, the smoothest sailing, but you should be able to hopefully adapt with that. That both keeps me up at night but also is exciting because it's, we might be 10 times stronger 2 years from now because it's forced us. The pandemic, as scary as it was at times, I was somebody who was strongly against remote employees.
Same.
I was like, there's no chance. It's the worst. And I remember, it was 2023 when we were changing offices, moving around. And I was like, honestly, I would never sign off on this if our remote employee policy approach wasn't so successful. And they were like, where was the guy in 2018 that we had that still bothers me to this day. A couple of really, really good team members. We had an office in Hoffman Estates, and they lived in the city, and they would commute, the reverse commute all the way out to Hoffman Estates. And I knew every day, I was like, today's the day that they're going to tell me they can't do it, and I don't know what I'm going to say, because I could not buy into remote employees. Once in a while, hey, I'm going to work from home today on a Friday. That's fine. Changed dramatically. Now I'm like, what? I mean, it doesn't matter. Katie and I talking on a Zoom call for an hour and a half. I don't need her to drive. We're fine. So again, I think unless you're in a space where, you're making one thing that just nobody uses anymore, I think there's still an opportunity for every company, organization to evaluate what they're doing and adapt and change. And sure, your bottom line may not look the same. Heck, it could be better, but that's both scary and exciting, and we're no different.
So I think what you're saying is, and this makes perfect sense as a business leader, as an alderman, as a coach, all the different hats you roll, you get jazzed up about building something.
Yeah, I do. I that's always been, once something gets to a point where it's kind of operational, then I let, people better and smarter than me take it and go, well, I don't know why you did this, and let's go do that. I'm the guy that likes to sit with a blank piece of paper and go, boy, I got a great idea for this, and kind of go and see where it takes you. And then eventually, some of those jump off the page and do work, and some of them, not so much. But that's the space that I get, probably the most excited about.
All right. Let's get into some rapid fire questions. Katie, you lead off.
What's the most St. Charles thing someone can do on a perfect Saturday?
Oh my gosh. So I'll try and steer away from sports, because every Saturday I have a student. I would say it's something tied to, Potawatomi Park, St. Mary's Park, followed up by, a walk down, First Street, wrapping up with, St. Charles Place is like my go-to favorite restaurant. So something with, you've got great outdoor space. You've got a ton of really good, bars, restaurants, good shopping down there. And then finishing up with dinner at St. Charles Place is really a can't miss, Saturday or Sunday.
Best hidden gem in St. Charles.
Best hidden gem. I don't know how hidden it is. But anytime you've got to get, donuts, pastry, Bosa donuts. I mean, like we were there, it's my wife's birthday today. So we got.
Did you get her the bacon maple?
I personally, it's going to sound bad. I didn't pick up the donuts. A family member did. And they're like, I'm so sorry I'm late. And why? Like the line at Bosa Donuts, there was like 50 people in there. So it's like, and you drive by it, it's not, the building doesn't jump off the page, but I'm telling you, you go in there, it is just packed. So it's a good one.
Are you team Scarecrow Fest or team Electric Christmas Parade?
Oh my God, I feel like I'm gonna have to find my allegiance. I'm definitely the Electric Christmas Parade, the lights parade. Scarecrow's great. My favorite time in St. Charles typically starts with Scarecrow Fest, and then just works its way for the next 4 months. So when Scarecrow Fest comes, I'm always like, oh, my birthday's right around there. I'm a fall guy. You're into football season, the weather. It's here comes Thanksgiving. Here comes the holiday lights parade. It's can't beat it. But if you're gonna hold my feet to the fire, I'd say the lights parade.
You meet someone in St. Charles, you've got 1 hour to do something with them. What's the most St. Charles thing you do with them?
Go to Whole Foods. I'm just kidding. You spend some time hanging out by the river. If you can find a way to get into the Arcata, the St. Charles Municipal Building is I guess that could be a hidden gem. That building's got so much history, and if you're into architecture, you like the space, but there's a lot of really cool history with St. Charles that doesn't always fly off, that you're not going to catch, especially if you're local and you lived right by it. And then you're kidding yourself with the number of great, you got a pub, bar, food. I mean, you can't miss. So I would do something tied in with the river. You got to get to the Arcata, check out the municipal center, and work your way around. But you kill an hour times, 6 or 7 like that.
What local restaurant would you defend with your life?
I just said St. Charles Place, but I am a sucker. You can do trying to pick between, would you do Zaza's? Would you do, it's hard for me to pick one. I would say if you had to, it would be St. Charles Place. It's in the second ward. That is not me being overtly biased, but it has always been the one that, family dinners, birthdays, whatever, we always end up there. It's just that go-to. And it's convenient because you can almost walk there for us.
More iconic, the Fox River or Arcata Theater?
I'm going to go Arcata only because it's ours. It's not shared with, X, where the river, I think a lot of communities can say, well, we've got the river a part of it. So the Arcata, but it's a close one.
What's the most competitive youth sport parent environment in St. Charles?
I was going to say Wasco baseball, but I was Wasco baseball. It is, what's crazy about Tri-City Charger football, so we've been in it for 2 years. You talk about such a great melting pot of, you got Batavia families, Geneva families, St. Charles families. You got Thompson, you've got Red Lang, you've got Little. So my youngest is now entering into, some riveting 6U and 7U flag football, which, we're getting after it. I would say that's the most competitive, but competitive they do it the right way. Like it is, you and I have been on practice fields together. You got 80, 90 kids at a particular age level. And whether you've got, 3-year experts or first-year kids who, their helmet's on the wrong way, it is competitive, but it's done competitive in like the right way. Like we're not, you're not, Johnny's not sitting on the bench for 4 quarters and doesn't get in. He's developing, he's growing, but everybody's kind of competing. I can't say enough good things about that organization in the 2 years that I've been there. St. Charles baseball is always going to be near and dear because it was kind of the first space that was honestly the first board that I kind of volunteered with. But from from an organization, from a competitive standpoint and doing that right way, that the Chargers program's great.
I always marvel at that, the way that they're able to ask these little guys to do these really big, scary things, and that they step up and they do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The coordination, if you've ever, again, only been there for 2 years, you walk out there on, the first couple of days, it is a sea of people, and they run it extremely well. Everybody's safe. You got all your gear. It's impressive. We were nervous. Again, first time going out there a couple of years ago. My older sons, who play football now in high school, they didn't play till they got to 7th grade at Red Lang. So this was a bit of a jump for us. But I was like, it's done. And I think it's a testament to why it is so popular and why it's because, it's competitive, it's well organized, the kids are safe, and you've got 5,000 people out there at the parks, and it goes really well.
So I coached for 3 years, and what amazes me still to this day is that parents show up to watch the practices, and they bring like picnics and like fireplaces and everything else. It's not just game day; they're in it to win it, man.
Yeah, you're right. It is. People show up like it's like a Bears practice.
All right, if money's no object and you're opening a business in St. Charles, what's the business you're opening?
Oh my gosh. So long time ago, my great great grandfather, or maybe great grandfather, he had a butcher shop in Watertown, Wisconsin, and the pictures. So like those like family heirlooms. So like my dad going and telling stories of like, oh, so it'd be my great grandfather. There you go, because it was his grandfather. They would go, his cousins, my uncle, all the kids in the neighborhood would go. They had this big butcher shop in Watertown, Wisconsin, and it was almost like a local hangout. And we have, again, there's some great local butchers. So that's really the reason. And with the Whole Foods, there's not need. But if money was no object, it would be recreating something like that. Because I see those pictures. My dad still shows where it's like, oh, there's Uncle David, and probably dropping things into buckets of whatever that he shouldn't have. But it would be something like a butcher shop.
So Katie comes from jelly and jam money.
I did not know that. Jelly and jam.
Yes, both.
Which one's more profitable, the jelly or the jam? Which one's making more money? I'll turn it around for the two of you. This is something that we, not city council wise, but work wise, are looking extremely close at because it's such a unique way of, as organizations are bombarded with different ways of like, hey, we can help you find, more leads or do X or find this. And there's all of this, noise out there. We are looking at this model of how do you bring people in a, an intimate, informal way where you're talking. So like, hey, you want to get to know our company more. What would be better than listening to, an hour-long podcast while you're, cutting the grass or driving the kids to whatever it is that you do, and you're like, I have no more questions about that team or that company. That's who we should go with. Versus if I send you 10,000 flyers or, whatever paid per click ad or, who's managing your SEO, because it's the intimacy of, you feel like you get to know that person. Again, you may not love everything you heard, or you may have questions about, well, how do they do that for their company, or what is that service? Obviously, that's your follow-up meeting, but we are looking so closely at this. So I have, I would say, a couple of motivations, but I know it's obviously to come and spend time with you guys, but also I'm like, as soon as this drops, I'm going to be taking this to my guys and going, we should do this, because it makes, we've talked about it versus like, how many more flyers can we send out? I don't know how big's the garbage can we're going to throw it in. So,
well, and actually it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I was resistant to it. And, because I think intimidated by it too.
Yeah.
And you have been the most wonderful first.
I appreciate you guys having me. It is not, I could sit and talk. That's again why it's easy to sit and talk about the things that you enjoy being around, right? And we could go into some tough topics where it's like, kill the camera. But the it is a really, really good platform that I think you're going to see, whether it's elected officials, business leaders, community stakeholders, the way we share information, the way that we communicate, the ability to sit and feel like people can talk openly and get whatever message or thing across. That is such a valuable way of doing it versus, here's 10,000 emails. We're still going to send them. You're still going to get the emails. You're still going to get the calls and the texts and the mailers. But this platform, I'm excited for you guys because I think it's going to be great.
Ryan, so, we've taken up a ton of your time today. I really appreciate a couple hours you gave us today now. Yeah. Where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? They want to talk to Ryan, learn more about you. What do they do?
If you're going from a city perspective, I always tell people the fastest way is just go to the city website and my email. I'm on there, daily, and it's a good paper trail if I miss something, which doesn't happen often, but sometimes you send an email, it gets it. So that's a good, if it's from a work perspective or, even, Tri-City Charger, some, local, I'm a big LinkedIn guy. I'm on LinkedIn a ton and messaging that way, hey, I heard X or had a question about Y. Those are typically, if it's not LinkedIn or my city email, those are always the fastest ways.
Great. Well, again, thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in. We hope you found something interesting and informative about today. If you liked what you heard about Ryan, his role as an alderman, and just the chat we had, share this podcast with someone else. Let them know about it. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thank you.